The notification sound from my phone cut through the December morning silence like a knife. I was sitting at our kitchen table in our Miami home, still in my pajamas, watching the palm trees sway gently outside our window while sipping my coffee. The Florida sun was already warming the day, a stark contrast to the traditional white Christmas most families dreamed of. I picked up my phone expecting maybe a work email or a reminder about grocery shopping, but instead, I found myself staring at a group message that would shatter everything I thought I knew about my place in this family. Christmas dinner at Mom's house, 6 p.m. sharp. Can't wait to see everyone. Karen, please bring your famous stuffing. Thomas, don't forget the wine like last year, LOL. Looking forward to our family tradition continuing. The message was from my sister-in-law, Jessica, sent to what appeared to be the entire family group chat. I scrolled through the responses that were already pouring in. Excited emojis, confirmations, jokes about who would carve the turkey. My heart began to race as I realized something that made my stomach drop to the floor. My name wasn't mentioned anywhere, and more importantly, I wasn't even included in this group chat. I sat there for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes, rereading the message over and over again. The coffee in my mug grew cold as I tried to process what I was seeing. This wasn't just an oversight or a technical glitch with the group messaging. This was deliberate. This was planned. This was my husband's family actively excluding me from their Christmas celebration. And apparently, they had created an entire group chat specifically designed to leave me out. The realization hit me like a physical blow, making it hard to breathe in the humid Miami air. Thomas was still asleep upstairs, completely unaware that his family had just delivered what felt like the final blow to my already fragile relationship with them. We'd been married for 3 years, and I'd always felt like an outsider looking in when it came to his family. His mother, Karen, had never warmed up to me, always making subtle comments about how different I was from Thomas's ex-girlfriend, how I didn't quite fit their family dynamic. But this was beyond subtle disapproval. This was outright rejection. And the fact that they felt comfortable enough to exclude me so blatantly told me everything I needed to know about where I stood. I found myself thinking back to all the family gatherings over the past 3 years, searching for signs I might have missed. The way conversations would sometimes stop when I entered a room. The inside jokes that no one ever bothered to explain to me. The way Karen would always seat me at the far end of the table, away from the main conversation. The way Thomas would get quiet and withdrawn whenever I tried to address these issues with him, always making excuses for his family's behavior. "That's just how they are," he would say, as if that somehow made it acceptable. My hands were shaking as I screenshot the message, though I wasn't sure why I felt the need to preserve this evidence of my exclusion. Maybe I needed proof that this was really happening, that I wasn't being overly sensitive or paranoid like Thomas sometimes suggested when I brought up his family's treatment of me. The screenshot felt like documentation of a crime, evidence of an emotional assault that I could present to a jury of my peers. But who would that jury be? Who in my life would understand the depth of this betrayal? The house felt different now, like the walls themselves were closing in on me. This beautiful home that Thomas and I had bought together in a lovely Miami neighborhood suddenly felt like a prison. The Christmas decorations we'd put up together just last weekend now seemed to mock me with their cheerful red and green colors. The stockings hanging by our fireplace, mine hanging right next to his, now felt like a cruel joke. How could I have been so naive to think that I was building a life, a family, with someone who would allow his relatives to treat me this way? As I sat there in the growing morning light, watching the neighbors start their day through our kitchen window, I realized that this moment was going to change everything. This wasn't just about missing one Christmas dinner. This was about finally seeing the truth that had been staring me in the face for 3 years. I wasn't just excluded from a family gathering. I was excluded from the family itself. And the most devastating part was that my own husband had allowed it to happen, had probably even participated in the planning of my exclusion. The woman I thought I was, loved, valued, part of something bigger than myself, was about to disappear forever. I heard Thomas's footsteps on the stairs about an hour later, his usual heavy morning shuffle that I'd grown accustomed to over our years together. He appeared in the kitchen, wearing his favorite Miami Heat t-shirt and boxer shorts, his dark hair sticking up in every direction. "Morning, babe," he mumbled, heading straight for the coffee maker without really looking at me. This was our typical morning routine. Him focused on caffeine, me already mentally planning our day. But today felt different. Today, I was studying his face, searching for any sign that he knew what his family had done, any hint of guilt or awareness in his expression. "Thomas," I said, my voice steadier than I expected it to be. "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." He turned around, coffee mug in hand, and I could see the slight wariness that crept into his eyes. It was the same look he got whenever I brought up his family, that defensive wall that would immediately go up. "What's the plan for Christmas dinner this year?" I watched his face carefully, looking for any tell, any sign that he knew exactly what I was talking about. The way his jaw tightened slightly told me everything I needed to know. "Oh, I think we're doing the usual thing at Mom's house," he said, taking a sip of his coffee and avoiding direct eye contact. "You know how she likes to host the big family dinner." The casual way he said it, as if this was just normal conversation, made my blood run cold. He knew, of course he knew. He was part of that group chat, part of the planning, part of the decision to exclude me. The man I'd married, the man I'd trusted with my heart and my future, was sitting here lying to my face while drinking coffee in our kitchen. I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshot of the group message. "So, when exactly were you planning to tell me that I'm not invited?" The words came out sharper than I intended, but I was past the point of trying to soften the blow for his comfort. I watched as his face went through a series of expressions: surprise, guilt, defensiveness, and finally, resignation. It was like watching someone's mask slip off in real time, revealing the person underneath who had been complicit in my humiliation all along. "Sarah, it's not like that," he started, but I held up my hand to stop him. "It's exactly like that, Thomas. Your family created a group chat specifically to exclude me from Christmas dinner, and you're part of it. You've been part of it this whole time." The silence that followed was deafening. Outside, I could hear the sound of children playing in the neighborhood, the normal sounds of a Saturday morning in Miami. But inside our kitchen, the air felt thick with 3 years of unspoken truths finally coming to the surface. He set his coffee mug down on the counter with more force than necessary, and I could see the frustration building in his posture. "Look, you know how my family is. They're set in their ways, and sometimes it's just easier to—" He trailed off, unable to finish the sentence, but I knew exactly what he was going to say. It was easier to exclude me than to deal with his family's disapproval. It was easier to let them treat me like an outsider than to stand up for his wife. It was easier to participate in my humiliation than to rock the boat with Mommy Dearest. "Easier for who, Thomas?" I asked, standing up from the table. "Easier for you? Easier for them? Because it's certainly not easier for me to find out that my husband's family has been planning Christmas dinner without me, and that my husband has been helping them do it." The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. This was the moment where he could choose to fight for me, to defend me, to show me that our marriage meant something to him. This was his chance to prove that I mattered more than his family's comfort. But instead, he just stood there, looking defeated and uncomfortable, like a child who'd been caught doing something wrong. "I was going to figure something out," he said weakly. "Maybe we could do our own thing, just the two of us." The pathetic nature of his response hit me like a slap. He wasn't angry that his family had excluded me. He wasn't planning to confront them or demand that I be included. He was just going to figure something out, like I was a problem to be managed rather than his wife who deserved to be defended. In that moment, I realized that I'd been fighting a losing battle for 3 years, trying to earn a place in a family that would never accept me, married to a man who would never truly choose me. The rest of that Saturday passed in a blur of tense silence and awkward attempts at normal conversation. Thomas tried to act like nothing had happened, suggesting we go to the beach or maybe catch a movie, but I couldn't shake the image of that group chat from my mind. Every time I looked at him, I saw someone who had been living a double life, someone who had been participating in my exclusion while pretending to be my loving husband. By evening, I found myself standing in our bedroom, staring at the Christmas cards we'd received from friends and family, all addressed to Thomas and Sarah, as if we were a real couple, a real team. Sunday morning brought another revelation that cut even deeper than the first. I was checking my email when I found a message from Karen, my mother-in-law, sent directly to me. "Sarah, dear," it began in that sickeningly sweet tone she always used, when she was about to deliver bad news. "I hope you understand that Christmas dinner is really just for immediate family this year. We're keeping it small and intimate. I'm sure you and Thomas can celebrate together in your own way." The casual cruelty of it took my breath away. She was giving me permission to be excluded from my own family. I read the email 3 times, each reading making me angrier than the last. The phrase, immediate family, echoed in my head like a slap. After 3 years of marriage, I still wasn't considered immediate family. After 3 years of trying to fit in, of bringing gifts to every birthday party, of listening to Karen's stories about Thomas's childhood, of pretending to laugh at inside jokes that excluded me, I was still just an outsider who could be dismissed when convenient. The email wasn't an apology or an explanation, it was a dismissal, pure and simple. Thomas found me in the kitchen an hour later, still staring at my phone. "She emailed me," I said without looking up. "Your mother actually took the time to email me and explain why I'm not welcome at Christmas dinner." I could see him tense up in my peripheral vision, that familiar defensive posture he always adopted when his family's behavior became impossible to ignore. "What did she say?" he asked, though his tone suggested he already knew. I handed him my phone and watched his face as he read his mother's words. "This is ridiculous," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'll talk to her." The promise felt empty, like all the other times he'd said he would handle his family's treatment of me. How many conversations had we had over the years about his mother's subtle digs, his sister's exclusionary behavior, his father's complete indifference to my existence? How many times had Thomas promised to address it, only to come back with excuses about how they meant well, how they just needed more time to warm up to me? I found myself thinking about Charles, our neighbor across the street. He was a widower in his 60s who had moved to Miami from New York after his wife passed away. We'd struck up a friendship over the past year, bonding over our shared love of gardening and our status as relative outsiders in this tight-knit neighborhood. Charles had often commented on how welcoming Thomas's family seemed whenever they visited. How lucky I was to have such a close-knit, extended family. If only he knew the truth about what happened behind closed doors, about the careful choreography of exclusion that had been playing out for 3 years. That afternoon, I found myself doing something I'd never done before. I started planning my own Christmas. Not our Christmas, not a compromise Christmas, but my Christmas. I pulled out my laptop and began researching recipes, thinking about decorations, considering who I might invite to join me. The idea felt both terrifying and liberating. For 3 years, I'd been trying to squeeze myself into someone else's vision of family, someone else's traditions, someone else's idea of who belonged and who didn't. What if I stopped trying to fit in and started creating something of my own? The more I thought about it, the more excited I became. I could invite Charles, who would probably be spending Christmas alone otherwise. I could reach out to some of my coworkers who didn't have family in Miami. I could create the kind of warm, inclusive celebration that I'd always wanted to be part of. The irony wasn't lost on me. In being excluded from Thomas's family Christmas, I was finally free to create the kind of Christmas I actually wanted. For the first time in days, I felt something other than hurt and anger. I felt possibility. Monday morning arrived with the kind of crisp December air that Miami rarely experienced, and I woke up with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. Thomas had already left for work, probably grateful to escape the tension that had been building in our house since Saturday. I made my coffee and sat at the kitchen table where this whole revelation had begun. But instead of feeling defeated, I felt energized. I had a plan now, and for the first time in 3 years, it was entirely my own plan, not some compromise designed to keep everyone else comfortable while I remained invisible. I started by walking across the street to Charles's house. He was in his front yard, tending to his impressive collection of tropical plants that had become the envy of the neighborhood. "Sarah," he called out with his usual warm smile. "How are you doing, dear?" There was something about his genuine kindness that almost brought tears to my eyes. When was the last time someone in my life had asked how I was doing and actually waited for an honest answer? "Charles, I have a proposition for you," I said, and I could see the curiosity spark in his eyes. I told him about my plan to host Christmas dinner, carefully omitting the painful details about why I was suddenly available to do so. I'm thinking of having a few people over who might otherwise be spending the holiday alone, I explained. Would you be interested in joining me? The way his face lit up was worth every moment of heartbreak I'd experienced over the weekend. Sarah, that sounds absolutely wonderful, he said. I haven't had a proper Christmas dinner since Margaret passed away. I would be honored to join you. The rest of the morning was spent making phone calls and sending texts. I reached out to my coworker Maria, who had mentioned that her family lived in Colombia and she couldn't afford to visit this year. I called my neighbor Mrs. Patterson, an elderly woman who lived alone with her 3 cats. I even invited Jake, the young guy who delivered our mail and always stopped to chat about his college classes. Each yes I received felt like a small victory. Each person who accepted my invitation felt like validation that I was worth spending time with, worth celebrating with. By afternoon, I was at the grocery store with a detailed shopping list, planning a menu that reflected my own tastes rather than trying to recreate someone else's family traditions. I chose a honey-glazed ham instead of turkey, decided on roasted vegetables with herbs from my own garden, and picked out ingredients for my grandmother's famous apple pie recipe that I'd never had the chance to make for Thomas's family. Every choice felt like an act of rebellion, a declaration that my preferences mattered, that my traditions had value. The strangest part was how normal it felt to be planning Christmas without Thomas's input. For 3 years, every holiday decision had been filtered through what his family would think, what his mother would prefer, what traditions we needed to honor to avoid conflict. Now, shopping for my own Christmas dinner, I realized how much of myself I'd been suppressing to fit into their narrow definition of acceptable. I was choosing foods I actually enjoyed, planning activities that interested me, creating an atmosphere that reflected who I really was rather than who they wanted me to be. When I got home, I found Thomas sitting at the kitchen table, looking uncomfortable and fidgety. "We need to talk," he said, and I could tell from his tone that he'd been rehearsing this conversation. "I spoke to my mother today." I set down my grocery bags and looked at him, waiting. "She said she sent you an email, and she feels bad about how it came across. She wants you to know that you're welcome to come to Christmas dinner." The words should have felt like a victory, but instead, they felt like an insult. "Let me guess," I said, unpacking my groceries with deliberate calm. She realized how bad it looked to exclude me so obviously, and now she's trying to do damage control. Thomas shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "It's not like that, Sarah. She genuinely wants you there." I turned to face him, and I could see in his eyes that he knew how hollow his words sounded. "Thomas, your mother spent 3 years making it clear that I don't belong in your family. She created a group chat specifically to exclude me from Christmas planning. She sent me an email explaining why I'm not immediate family. And now, after I've made other plans, she suddenly wants me there? Do you really think I'm that desperate for her approval?" The notification sound on my phone cut through the quiet December evening like a knife. I was folding laundry in our Miami bedroom, the warm breeze from the open window carrying the scent of jasmine from our neighbor's garden. Thomas was downstairs watching football, and I could hear the distant cheers from the TV mixing with the sound of palm fronds rustling outside. When I picked up my phone, expecting maybe a work email or a text from my sister, I saw something that made my blood run cold. It was a group message from Karen, my mother-in-law, titled "Christmas Plans, Family Only." The preview showed enough to make my hands shake as I opened it fully. "Hi everyone, just finalizing our Christmas dinner plans for this year. We'll be gathering at our house on Christmas Eve at 6 p.m. as usual. Please let me know if you're bringing anything special. Can't wait to see all the family together again. It's been too long since we've had everyone under one roof. Thomas, please confirm you're coming and let us know about dietary restrictions. Looking forward to our traditional celebration with just the core family members. Love you all." The message was sent to what looked like the entire extended family group chat, including Thomas's siblings, their spouses, and even some cousins I barely knew. But as I scrolled through the recipient list, my name was nowhere to be found. After 3 years of marriage, I wasn't even considered family enough to receive the invitation directly. My chest tightened as I read the message again, searching for some explanation, some oversight that would make this make sense. But the phrase, "family only," kept echoing in my mind, each repetition feeling like a slap across the face. I had spent the last 3 Christmases with Thomas's family, bringing homemade desserts, helping with cleanup, trying desperately to fit into their tight-knit circle. I remembered last year when Karen had complimented my pecan pie, saying it was almost as good as her mother's recipe. I had taken that as progress, as acceptance. Now I realized it was probably just politeness, the kind you show to a temporary guest who might not be around much longer. The worst part wasn't even the exclusion itself. It was the casual way it was done, like I was so insignificant that they didn't even need to actively exclude me. I was simply forgotten, not worth the consideration of a direct conversation or even a polite excuse. As I sat there on the edge of our bed, surrounded by the domestic comfort of our shared life, I felt more alone than I had in years. The sound of Thomas's laughter drifting up from downstairs felt like it was coming from another world, a world where he was part of a family that would never truly accept me. I wondered if he even knew about this message, or if he was complicit in this deliberate oversight. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears as I walked downstairs, my phone clutched in my trembling hand. Thomas was sprawled on our cream-colored sofa, a beer balanced on his chest, completely absorbed in the game. The Christmas tree we had decorated together just last weekend stood in the corner, its lights twinkling cheerfully, mocking the darkness that had just settled over my holiday spirit. Our stockings hung side by side on the mantel, Thomas and Sarah embroidered in matching red thread, a symbol of the unity that apparently existed only in our home. I stood in the doorway for a moment, watching him, wondering how I was going to bring up this conversation without sounding paranoid or dramatic. "Thomas," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't look away from the screen, just made a non-committal humming sound that I had learned meant he was listening, but not really present. I tried again, louder this time. "Thomas, I need to talk to you about something." This time he glanced over, probably hearing the strain in my voice, and I saw his expression shift from casual annoyance to mild concern. I held up my phone, the group message still open on the screen. "Did you know about your mom's Christmas dinner plans?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, even as my world felt like it was tilting off its axis. He sat up slowly, setting his beer on the coffee table with deliberate care, and I could see him processing what I was showing him. His eyes scanned the message, and I watched his face carefully for any sign of surprise, outrage, or even embarrassment on my behalf. But what I saw instead was something much worse, a flicker of recognition, followed quickly by what looked almost like resignation. "Sarah, I'm sure it's just an oversight," he said, but his voice lacked conviction, and he wouldn't quite meet my eyes. "Mom probably just forgot to add you to the group. You know how she is with technology." But even as he said it, we both knew that wasn't true. Karen was perfectly capable with her phone, and she had never forgotten to include me in anything before, because I had never been included in the first place. The silence that followed felt heavy and suffocating, filled with all the things we weren't saying. I could see Thomas struggling with something, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he couldn't quite spit out. Finally, he reached for his phone, and I felt a spark of hope that maybe he would call his mother, demand an explanation, defend me the way a husband should defend his wife. Instead, he started typing what looked like a text message, his thumbs moving slowly across the screen. "I'll just ask her about it," he said quietly, still not looking at me. "I'm sure we can work something out." But the way he said "work something out" made it sound like I was a problem to be solved rather than his wife who had been deliberately excluded from his family's most important celebration.